Hey guys! One of my all-time favorite things to do in the fall is to make blankets. Blankets are warm, they're cozy. I especially love making baby blankets. And today I'm going to show you how to make your very own baby blanket. And just as a warning, I make really big blankets. I like to make baby blankets that kids can grow into as toddlers and children. So the amount of yarn I'm using is a lot, but you can half it and end up with a smaller baby blanket. That would be perfectly acceptable. So I'm actually using this thicker yarn. I'm going to use 14 of these little rolls. If you find them in the bigger packs, 5 will give you the same amount of yarn. And I'm also using the 9mm crocheting hook. So the pattern of this blanket is a wave design. So you can probably see there are a bunch of waves that appear. And I'm going to be using the double crochet stitch for the bulk of the blanket and a single crochet stitch for the border. So if you feel like you need help with either of those stitches before we start, check out my tutorials. Otherwise, let's get started. So I've created my slip knot and now I'm ready to start the blanket. So I'm making 4 waves in the blanket. Each wave requires 17 chain stitches. So that brings the amount of chains you want to start with to 68. So I'm going to go ahead and just crochet 68 chain stitches. And I'm making sure that my stitches are not too tight because the stitches that you're going to do throughout the blanket are a little bit looser, and if your bottom is really tight, it affects how the whole blanket looks. So just give yourself a little bit of leeway when you pull the needle through. And once I get to 68, I'll show you what to do next. So I've done my 68 chain stitches and now I'm going to start doing my double crochet stitches. And I'm going to use that stitch throughout the blanket. The only exception is when I do the border, I'm going to do the single crochet stitch. But I'm going to go ahead and start with a double crochet stitch. So I'm going to chain 3. And then I'm going to go in right next to where I am. So these are my first 2 stitches, and I'm going to do 7 just like this. Okay, so I've done my 7, and now what I'm going to do is 3 crochet stitches all in this next hole right next to the one I've been working in. And that's going to create kind of the peak of the wave. So that's what it looks like when you have 3 in one chain. And then I'm going to do 7 more that are normal. And this looks like it's going very slow. The first row is a little bit slow just because you're having to go into stitches that aren't the most quick to go through. But once you're on your second row and beyond, the stitches become much faster to do. So I think I've done 7. So this is where I did 3, and then I'm just going to count and make sure it's really 7, and it is. So I've done 7 normal, a 3 and 1, 7 normal, and then I'm going to skip 2. So I still do the double crochet stitch, but I'm going to count over 2 loops. So 1, 2, and I'm going to go into the third one. So I'm just skipping 2 loops. And you end up with something that looks a little bit like a triangle, and that's going to make the new wave start to go back up. So you can already tell I'm starting to get that wave pattern where it goes up and it peaks because I put 3 and 1 right here. Then it goes back down, and then it's going to start to go back up after skipping these 2. So I'm going to keep doing the same thing. So 7 normal, that's my first of the new 7. Alright, so I've done 7 more double crochets, and now it's time for me to do the 3 and 1. So I'm going to go into the loop that's just to the left of the one I just worked in, and I'm going to do 3 double crochets. Alright, so there's my 3 and 1, and I'm going to do 7 normal double crochets now, and that's going to finish off this next wave. Alright, so I'm just going to go back to where I did the 3 and 1 and count from there and make sure I've done 7, which it looks like I have. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did the last time and just skip over 2. So that's 1, that's 2, and then I'll go into the third one with my double crochet. Alright, so once you finish this first row, you can kind of see the waves starting to form. And everything else is much quicker and easier than that first row. So you're going to do the double crochet, and so you're going to do 3 chains, and you want to do 7 double crochets, and once you get to the middle of the 3 that you did the 3 and 1, this is where you're going to do your new 3 and 1. It should always be right on top of the last one. So you don't want to have a 3 and 1 that's on the edge or 3-in-1 that's down here. It should always be right in the middle. So that means that before you get to this stitch, you want to have 7 double crochets. So I like to count backwards. So I know this is going to be 7 right here, and this is going to be 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and this is the first one. So I'm going to do my next double crochet into this gray stitch. And you always want to double check when you're starting a row just to make sure you're not getting off track. As you can probably see, it's going a lot quicker with crocheting once you're in the second row. All right, so I've done 7 double crochets, and now I am at this point, this gray stitch that I talked about, and I'm going to do my 3-in-1. So once that's done, and as you can see, it's sitting right on top of the old one, you're going to do 7 double crochets. Alright, so I've done 7 double crochets for my 3-in-1, so it's down to this point where I see the triangle. And I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches and go in the third. And everything needs to be right on top of the row below. So this triangle should be sitting right on top of the last one, not lopsided or anything crazy like that, or your blanket's going to start to look kind of funny. So I'm going to work on my 7 double crochets going up another wave. Alright, so that's another 7. And then you're going to do a 3-in-1 that's sitting right in the middle on top of the old one. So once you've done those 3, you do another 7 normal double crochets. And then you get to this point where you see the triangle again, and you're just going to skip the next 2 and go into the third and just make a new triangle that sits on top of the old. So if you want to make a blanket that's about 5 feet long, which I feel like is a pretty good size for a baby blanket or a toddler blanket, you want to do about 46 rows, and you can kind of see what the blanket is looking like with 2 rows plus starting the third row is starting to take shape. So I'll meet you back towards the end of the blanket. Just keep doing the same thing you've been doing over and over again, and then you'll end up with a nice sized blanket. For the border, I'll be doing a single crochet stitch, so I'll show you exactly how to do that as well. Alright, so I'm ready to begin doing my border. The border is going to be the single crochet stitch. So it should be pretty quick. I work right to left when I do my border. And I'm starting at the very top of the blanket as well. So I'm coming to the end of bordering off the top of my blanket, and you can see how it looks a little more finished than it did before. I'm ready to begin bordering off the side of my blanket. So when the top or any side meets another side, I like to put extra stitches in the corner. So I might do 3 in 1 instead of just filling in the 1 stitch. And that's so that I get a rounded edge rather than a square edge. So you can kind of see how it rounds things off a little bit when you do that. I'm just going to rotate my work. Still working right to left. So I'm going to go in wherever I can find loops to go through and do my single crochet stitch. So it's a little trickier. It's not as nice and neat as doing a top or a bottom, but you do what you can. So there may be times when you're able to pick up 2 pieces of yarn. Sometimes you're only able to pick up 1. It doesn't really matter. You can't really tell. The main point is that you're creating some type of border and that you're hiding these strings in your work. And try to space your stitches apart as closely to the spacing that you did in the top row. So it may mean that you're having to go in and create a stitch where you feel like there shouldn't be a stitch, but the spacing is important. You don't want to have big gaps in between your stitches. Alright, so here is the first string I want to tie in. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter so that it's easier for me to tie the whole thing in. And I'm going to go into my next stitch, and instead of just having this piece that I'm pulling through, I'm going to pull through the extra string as well. Like that. And so it's pretty hidden. If I see anything that's sticking out after doing this, I'll just go back and trim off what's sticking out because you've hidden it the best that you can. So I'm at the very end of the project. I'm almost done with my border. The last thing I'm going to do is just make sure that my 4th corner has extra stitches in it, just so that they all look the same. They're a little rounded off. And for my last stitch, in order to make this look smoother, I'm just going to pull through instead of doing a single crochet, and that's it. So I'm going to tie it off. And then any of this remaining string, you just want to hide into the stitches that you did. So I'm just pulling through with the crochet needle, going down the row. So I'll do a couple of those. And then I just cut the excess. Alright, and there is the whole blanket, so you can see what it looks like when it's done. So that's it. That's all you have to do. It's a big project. It takes a couple hours if you have a lot of practice. But don't be discouraged. Just do the best that you can and you'll end up with something like this.